Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd do a Friday reads to give you an idea of what I'll be reading this weekend. I have, what do I got here? Six books here, and there's also a seventh. There's one that I don't have with me here. Uh, it's really good, but you're never going to see it in a bookstore. It's by a smaller publisher. It's very expensive. It's a hardcover. Probably comes wrapped in plastic. So I can highly recommend it. Uh, but you're going to have to order it if you really want it. And I would suggest, as traders as it is, that to the publisher that you just order it from your library or interlibrary loan it, just in case you don't like it. It's called Margaret of York and Her Six Daughters-in-Law by Retha Warnicki, and it's a book about uh, Tudor women, and it's on my mind because I'm writing about the private lives of Tudor women by the great Elizabeth Norton for Open Letters in July, and so the whole question of Tudor women is on my mind, and Warnicki's book is fantastic. It's really good. It's worth the effort for you to find and read. I just don't know how much effort that will be. We've gone over this before on this channel. A lot of you just don't have access to books in a way that really breaks my heart. I think you should probably all move to Boston. But in the meantime, there's that. I definitely want to recommend that, and I will try to remember to put the information down below because it's a Tudor book well worth reading. So is Elizabeth Norton's book. But then I've got actual, dinosaur printed books to show you, starting with a made-up story. I got an advanced copy of it, and I read 50 pages or so, and I thought, oh my God, this is like eating extremely sugary cake frosting with nothing else. This is just too much. It's rotting my mental teeth. But the way with fiction, it just drives me nuts. I don't know how people review fiction for a living. I really don't. The way with fiction where you read something and then you go on about your day with muscular teenagers or reading about D-Day the way a normal person would, and in the back of your mind that fiction that you read about is shifting around and it's pulling at emotions that it didn't pull at while you were reading it, and scenes are coming forward in your mind. I don't understand how fiction does that. It drives me nuts, and that was happening with this book. So I've decided I'm going to go back, sit down and read the whole thing just to see. And it's this, The Map That Leads to You by J.P. Moninger. And it's about, the premise in the first 40 pages is just so predictable. A button-up, joyless woman a young woman whose life is all tracked out for her, goes on a backpacking Eurail train trip in Europe and meets a guy who's not only unbelievably gorgeous, but also a kind of poetry spouting free spirit who kind of inspires her to unbutton her life, and they have an immediate simpatico connection, and then they part ways. And from what I gather from the pub sheet, the rest of the book is her and him apart, and are they going to come together, and what's it going to be like, and when's it going to happen, and how's it going to happen, and is she maybe going to get married first to to any of the is she going to marry Mr. Casaubon first, or is she going to wait for Will Ladislaw? That sort of thing that has just been bedeviling fiction forever, and that drives me crazy about it because that's so incredibly unreal. Anyway, something about the beginning of the chunk that I read stuck with me, so I'm going to read the whole thing. But all the rest of it is real books. So starting with this one, Private Government, which I have read advanced. I've read some reviews of it, and they really intrigue me. It's about the modern workplace and the unbelievable amount of influence that our jobs have on our private lives. Bosses who call us at home, priorities that we're expected to take out of the office. Not we. The metaphorical we in this case. I'm not wearing any pants, but I don't count. I mean, most people. You know what I mean? People in corporate and official business America, where the dividing line, thanks to advanced technology, to smart technology, the dividing line between your job and your personal life has all but vanished. And of course, the one way it hasn't vanished is compensation. You're compensated when you're in the building. You're not compensated for all the work you're doing at home. And bosses have become this omniscient figure. They're they know everything about you. They follow your every move, and they have access to you all the time. It's I think it's going to be fascinating. I really do. It's got red tape on the cover, and it's going to point out a world totally different from, for instance, the world of my father, who worked for 50 years, and if any of he worked mostly for the newspaper industry and then for the government, and if any of his bosses in the 1950s had called him at home for any reason other than calling him on the afternoon of Christmas Eve to wish him a Merry Christmas and then get right off the phone, if any of them had called him at home, he would have been into work at 9:01 on Monday, on the following Monday morning, gone into their office and all but physically threatened them. It was unheard of. And now it's the norm. So I can't wait to read the book. And that's kind of sociological study definitely carries over to our next book. I've already read this. This is a reread, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is certainly one of the best works of nonfiction, general nonfiction, that I will read in 2017. It's incredible on every page. It's Bob Sapolsky's book, Behave. And it's all about the science and the metrics and his incredible, insightful understanding of how and why humans do almost everything they do. Work, eat, mating, lying, telling the truth, self-sacrifice, watching the news. It permeates on every page. This really smart old guy. I actually think he's 5 years younger than I am, but that's her. This really smart guy looking at the world. Why are things the way they are? Why are they? I now study what they are, and then I'm going to study the science of why they are that way. What happens to make them that way? I know I'm being vague because the book covers a lot of ground, but I cannot recommend it strongly enough. If you have been unfortunate enough to read The Gigantic Pile of Sheep Dip by Steven Pinker, called The Better Angels of Our Nature, and if by some chance you found yourself maybe convinced by him, this is the perfect antidote. This is the book that book is not. This is the book, the version of the approach to that subject that isn't three-card Monty snake oil salesmanship. This is the real deal. I can't wait to reread it. I'm going to study it this time. And then the last three books that we're going to do here, because I'd like to keep this video under 30 minutes. I was just noting the other day, I was just noticed, had it pointed out to me, and it's actually, I've noticed it myself, that it's actually extremely easy for me to get a video up to 40 minutes. This whole business of, oh my God, what will I do for an hour-long video? How about any normal day when when I forget to police myself, the videos balloon to 45 minutes easily. And yet you people are sitting there telling me you want more. That you want me to give an hour-long talk on the Shakespearean authorship controversy or my days in bookstores. Good Lord. The whole point of Grandpa Simpson in The Simpsons is that nobody wants to hear his stories. I don't know what's wrong with you people. I really don't know. Anyway, the next three books are all revolve around faith. They all revolve around relatively the same subject. And one is something we've seen before that it really is an automatic put it right away on your nightstand or your TBR in BookTube world. Read it right away. It really is, and it's this. It's The Great Shift by James Kugel, and it's about God going away. It's about God becoming an idea and not being a person anymore. And that is exactly the kind of thing that it's in the background and you've never thought about it, and then he will come along and think about it. There are a couple of other writers who will do the same thing. There are a couple of other theological writers, not all of them Christian. David Wolpe is a rabbi, and he does exactly the same sort of thing. N.T. Wright is another one where they will look at this landscape, this lush landscape of modern faith, and something that has never jumped out to anybody will jump out to them, and they'll all of a sudden want to examine it, and will be fascinated to go along for the ride. And that's what this is. This is a book about how God went away, how he stopped being a person you could meet on the road, a person who could pick you as a friend, a person who could. Well, we're told in Genesis that he walks in the cool of the evening. You know, just the other day, It was murderously hot and humid here in Boston. I don't complain about the heat at all. I absolutely love it. But there is that moment that it's as true in Hebron as it is in Boston, where after the sun has gone down, but before the full night has begun, when a breath of cool just sort of flows across the land. It isn't happening in the American West right now. Sorry to taunt you, but it is true in most of the world that the cool of the evening really is a phenomenon before nightfall, with its own attendant mysteries and dangers and whatever. And we're told in Genesis, a lovely phrase, we're told in Genesis that God was walking in the Garden of Eden in the cool of the evening. And God doesn't do that anymore. The writer of that passage in Genesis did not mean it metaphorically. The writer of that passage in Genesis meant that God was enjoying a stroll in the evening, and that if you had been nearby, you would have seen him. And that doesn't happen anymore. No matter how many crackpot Christians write their memoirs and send them to me at Kirkus. I just talked to Jesus just the other day. No matter how many of those sit in front of their computer and type out a quick memorial about their chat with Jesus Christ, God doesn't walk around. He doesn't go down to Nineveh to see what they're doing. And they can look over to a mountaintop and see him standing there looking at them. That doesn't happen anymore. And this is an examination of why. And I can't wait to read it. So I put it right on the list. And then the next one is kind of a graphic novel, although it doesn't tell one concerted story. It's Stephen Nadler and Ben Nadler. It's Heretics. And it is it bills itself as an illustrated history of philosophy. Just a cartoon history of philosophy. But what it really is a cartoon history of the Enlightenment. And not just the whole of the Enlightenment, but the one key element of the Enlightenment, which was to decouple intellectual life from religious life. Forever. To say, well, okay, I went to school, same as you did. I was raised Catholic, same as you were. I go to church every week, same as you do. But I also sit in my book-lined living room and I think about these things, and I don't think any of it is true. Not true in the sense that a rock through a window is true. It might have some other truth, but it isn't literally true. And I'm not doing this because I'm mad at anyone, and I'm not doing this to attack any church or any believer. I'm doing this because I've been sitting in this book-lined room, and that's the conclusion I've come to. And I think it's stronger than any other conclusion, so I'm going to stick with it. And this is the illustrated history of the men and the occasional woman who did that. And I thumbed through it at great length, but I want to pore over it now. I want to read the whole thing and see. The drawings are very, very playful, so I want to see what larger themes the authors have been working out that you'd miss if you just paged through it. And then the last one, I'm almost done droning. Don't worry. The last one is something that I just got the other day. I opened it off camera. And it's talk about the confluence of science and religion. It doesn't get any more confluent than this. It's Priest of Nature. This is the religious life of Isaac Newton. This is by Rod Iliffe, who is a history professor at Oxford. And it's all about the religious life of Isaac Newton, which was, of course, an overwhelmingly powerful dimension in his life. People, new atheists, the aforementioned new atheists, tend to forget that. Scientists, Neil deGrasse Tyson, they tend to airbrush that fact away to concentrate on the fact that Newton was one of the greatest scientific minds in human history. But Newton, his own life, was suffused with Christianity. And the Newton writings that I have read that you have not seen and that no one is ever going to reprint, if you take the whole lifetime writings of Isaac Newton, the science stuff is right here. And all the rest of it is religious writing. All of it. Crazy dream visions, biblical exegesis, numerical analysis, the vast amount of what he wrote was religious, and I've read it all, and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. It gives you the same impression that you get when you read his scientific stuff, only in the scientific stuff it's more muted, and that impression, unfortunately, is that this guy was bonkers. It's just completely insane, and we just benefit from that. Humankind just benefited from that. It was one of those rare instances where absolute barking insanity was channeled into a way that where its completely strange viewpoints actually did us all some good. But I have read. You remember on this channel, those of you who've seen the 1,700 videos in the backlist will know that I've read well, every serious English language biography of Isaac Newton that's ever been written. I love reading about the man. And the religious aspect is, of course, covered in all of those books. Just the other day, we mentioned In the Presence of the Creator by Gail Christensen. It's strongly covered in that book. But I don't believe I've ever read a book just about that. So we'll see what this author does. It can go one of two ways. Either this will be essentially a Newton biography that just didn't bill itself as that in order to maybe set itself apart from the crowd, or it will be a monograph that has no Newton biography except for the stuff that's pertinent to the subject. I'm okay either way. But the general public is not. So, if I read this and it turns out to be a monograph on religion in the life of Isaac Newton, then on some venue, probably Open Letters, I will have to sound a moderate warning bell. I'll have to say, if you're a general reader who's interested in science and the history of science, and you're browsing in your local bookstore and you see this stacked in a Barnes & Noble, and you shouldn't get it. You should borrow it from the library instead, because it's not what you think. It's not going to help you. Unless you already know everything there is to know about the life of Isaac Newton, it's not going to help you. I don't know which kind of book it is, but I'll have to find out. So that's a bit of Friday Reads. I imagine that a lot of the stuff that I'm not showing here will be ancillary reading about women in Tudor England. But we've got The Religious Life of Isaac Newton. We've got a graphic novel about the Enlightenment. We've got The Great Shift, which is a must-read of a book. I can already recommend it almost, unless it's a huge drop-off. And then a book I very much can recommend. It's a chunker, and it's no easy walk in the park, but it is worth the time of every single one of you, and that is Bob Sapolsky's Behave. And then Private Government, those of you who work will probably want to read it. And The Map That Leads to You, which I read the first 40 or so pages. I get the impression that the book will be very easy to read, and I also get the impression it's going to be the mother of all tearjerkers. But I will report back. And that's it for my Friday Reads. And as usual with Friday Read video, I'd like to hear what you're working on. The last time we did this, the last Friday Reads, the stuff that showed up in the comments field was all over creation, and it was all fascinating because I absolutely love my subscribers. So feel free to chime in, especially since I have more subscribers now than I did then. What explains that? I don't know. But anyway, I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.